Today is Election Day in America. Voters head to the polls in states across the country today for the first major political test for both parties since President Trump took office. 3 races in particular in New York, New Jersey, and Virginia are being closely watched as a sign of what Americans want heading into next year's midterms. And the New York mayoral race could be a test for Democrats, with self-described Democratic socialist Zohran Mamdani leading former Democratic Governor Andrew Cuomo. We're covering it all. CBS News political director Fin Gómez is covering New Jersey and Virginia, but we start with CBS News national correspondent Lilia Luciano, who has more on the New York mayoral race. So, Lilia, what advantage does Cuomo feel he has over Mamdani in tackling New York City's issues besides experience?
Well, besides experience is a good question, because that is definitely something that we have both heard from voters and something that he has really tried to drive home. Look, what I've heard, Lindsay, from people coming in to vote and walking out after they vote is the devil you know. One young Cuomo voter told me that he wasn't entirely enthusiastic about Cuomo, but that he didn't really trust Mamdani, that he felt like he could represent too much of a change. And so Cuomo he associated with keeping New York kind of the way he associates his upbringing to sound, feel, look like. We have heard from female voters, a couple of whom mentioned the sexual harassment accusations. One says that she was very concerned about that, but as a Jewish woman living in New York, she feared that Mamdani would not really represent her community or even support Jewish New Yorkers. So that message that is coming from the Cuomo campaign seems to land with a lot of Jewish voters here. Another voter talked to me about President Trump and the impact that President Trump endorsing Cuomo had in her decision to vote. I want to play a little bit of what she told me.
And I would never vote for Cuomo now. Trump endorsed him. That was, to my mind, a kiss of death. And it's his cronyism. I've always worried about the fact that he'd get into bed with Trump.
So it's interesting, because when I first started hearing from this woman, I asked her, what are the issues that weigh on your mind and your decision? And she started talking about how Mamdani scares her in a way, or she said something like she didn't trust Mamdani. And then she went to talk about Cuomo. So I thought she voted for Cuomo, and I asked him, oh, so did you vote for Cuomo? And she said, no. What makes you think that? She said, which is something that I found very interesting, because it kind of parallels what we've been hearing because of that generational divide. So many young people have come out to vote for Mamdani, and what she told me is the cronyism. She talked about corruption. She said she doesn't entirely like Cuomo, was not going to vote at all, then decided to vote against Cuomo and was still undecided, but talked to her children. She said it was her millennial children who got her enthusiastic in a way about Mamdani, and that's how she showed up to vote today.
And whether Democratic socialist Zohran Mamdani wins or not, does his rapid political rise change the face of the party going forward?
Look, this is what New Yorkers have been talking about for weeks. Part of the energy of this campaign, whether it is what President Trump is saying and depicting him as the new face of the Democratic Party, or the Democratic Socialists and young people, or the people who were extremely concerned about the situation that Palestinians were facing in Gaza, there are big groups that are saying either they fear or they hope that Mamdani represents the future of the Democratic Party. There's a lot of people in the center there that Cuomo is fiercely trying to cater to.
Lilia Luciano, thank you. Let's turn now to CBS News political director Fin Gómez in Washington for us. So, Fin, both New Jersey gubernatorial candidates have made affordability and high taxes a centerpiece of their campaigns. What cases have each made to prove they can tackle those issues?
Yeah, Lindsay, both candidates are framing the race as almost a referendum on the state's cost of living. Democratic Mikey Sherrill is pitching herself as a centrist problem solver who can lower costs without cutting essential services. Republican Jack Ciattarelli, meanwhile, says Democrats have had decades to fix affordability and have failed. He's tied Sherrill to Governor Phil Murphy, the Democratic governor he lost to by just 3 points 4 years ago. But he's promising tax cuts on property and property reform, cuts to state spending, and a rollback to regulations he says are driving businesses out of New Jersey. But both are focused in on this crucial issue that are affecting middle-class families who feel squeezed by rising housing, energy, and grocery costs. But what I'm watching in particular here, Lindsay, is how the Latino electorate, about a fifth of the state's population, break on this issue in particular. Latino voters that I spoke to in New Jersey are deeply concerned with this issue. And if you recall, Lindsay, last year President Trump made strong inroads with the Hispanic community there. They once were considered a reliable Democratic core group, but Democrats are hopeful that because of this issue and because of the ICE operations in New Jersey, Latinos will swing back to the Democratic column. I will note, Lindsay, I was in New Brunswick, New Jersey recently, and I went to a Latino barbershop, and I did a little sample size polling of my own, and everyone there, for the most part, was supporting Chitterelli, in part because of this issue. But I think it also shows that neither party should take this increasingly swing electorate for granted. Lindsay?
And President Trump has made it clear he hopes voters will cast their ballots for Republican candidates across the board. But he has stopped short of endorsing the GOP candidate for governor in Virginia, Winsome Earl-Sears. She's trailing her Democratic rival, Abigail Spanberger. What's going on there?
Yeah, even last night during a tele-rally, he did not mention her when he was talking about the Republican ticket in Virginia. But this all stems back largely because their relationship has soured since his loss in 2020. Earl-Sears was one of the first prominent Virginia Republicans to publicly acknowledge President Biden's victory and said at the time that Trump should, quote, accept the results and move on. And that break, it matters, particularly because she is trying to get past her Republican base there in Virginia. And even with an endorsement from Trump, it would help mobilize the Republican base. But also, it's an issue. It's been consistent through the cycle, and it's a little bit of an embarrassment, frankly, if you will. But it's something that we do not expect to change. We do not expect an endorsement in this late stage from the president to the Virginia Republican gubernatorial nominee.
Vin Gómez, thank you. California voters will decide if the state's voting district should be redrawn to help Democrats flip as many as 5 House seats in the 2026 midterms. Prop 50 seeks to counter Republicans in red states like Texas, who were redrawing maps at the request of President Trump. The measure, backed by Governor Gavin Newsom, asks voters if California should suspend its independent process and adopt new congressional districts starting next year. Stay with CBS News 24/7 all day for updates on races around the country, and make sure to stream our special coverage beginning on the Takeout at 5 p.m. Eastern. We'll continue to follow the results after the polls close beginning at 9 Eastern.